Something unprecedented just happened in North America. While the United States built a massive tariff wall to keep Chinese electric vehicles out, Canada just opened the floodgates. And America is absolutely losing its mind. On January 16, 2026, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney flew to Beijing and negotiated a deal that changes everything. Canada slashed its tariff on Chinese EVs from 100% down to 6.1%. They're allowing 49,000 Chinese vehicles per year to enter the Canadian market, rising to 70,000 within 5 years. In exchange, China reduced tariffs on Canadian canola oil from 85% down to 15%. The reaction from Washington was instant and furious. President Donald Trump threatened to impose a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods if the deal proceeds. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned that Canada would live to regret the day they let the Chinese Communist Party flood North America with their EVs. But here's what makes this absolutely explosive. Canada doesn't care. Carney stood in front of cameras and said China has become more predictable than the US in recent months. He called Trump's threats exactly what they are: economic coercion. And he's moving forward anyway. America just lost control of its own backyard, and the consequences are going to reshape the entire automotive industry. Let's understand exactly what's happening here. Canada is allowing 49,000 Chinese EVs annually at a 6.1% tariff. That's approximately 3% of Canada's total annual vehicle market, which sells about 1.8 million vehicles per year. But here's the critical detail: that 49,000 represents roughly 20% of Canada's entire EV and plug-in hybrid market. 1/5 of all electric vehicles sold in Canada could soon be Chinese. And there's more. The deal specifically requires that 50% of these imported Chinese EVs must be priced under $35,000 CAD, approximately $26,000 USD, within 5 years. Canada isn't just opening its market to Chinese manufacturers. It's specifically targeting the affordable EV segment where American and legacy automakers have completely failed. Before this deal, Canada had exactly one EV priced under $40,000, and it wasn't competitive. Europe had 21 affordable EVs under that price point. Canadian consumers were getting destroyed on pricing while their government forced them to buy expensive EVs they couldn't afford. The result? Canada became the only country in the world where EV sales actually declined in 2025. Sales plummeted from 18% of new passenger vehicles at the end of 2024 to just 9% in 2025. The Canadian EV market didn't slow down, it collapsed. BYD is the obvious frontrunner. They're already the world's largest EV manufacturer, operating in over 100 countries with established export operations across Europe, Australia, and Southeast Asia. The BYD Seagull sells for around $10,000 USD in China. Even with shipping costs and compliance expenses, that vehicle could land in Canada for $15,000 to $20,000 CAD. The BYD Seal, their Model 3 competitor, could retail for $25,000 to $35,000. The BYD Auto 3, Dolphin, Tang, and Han round out a complete product range from affordable city cars to luxury sedans. Geely has a massive advantage. They own Volvo and Polestar, both of which already have established Canadian dealer networks. Geely manufactured vehicles could potentially enter through existing channels, blurring the line between Chinese EV and Swedish brand made in China. SAIC, which owns the MG brand, already sells vehicles in Europe under a brand with North American heritage. Chery recorded 2.6 million global vehicle sales in 2024, with exports reaching 1.144 million units. Dongfeng would likely target fleet sales and commercial relationships rather than retail showrooms. The flood isn't one massive wave. It's multiple manufacturers with different strategies, different price points, and different target customers, all entering simultaneously. And every single one of them offers better value than what legacy automakers are selling. In 2024, Canada imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, mirroring the United States. They ended purchase incentives. They paused EV mandates. The result was catastrophic. EV sales fell from 18% to 9% of new passenger vehicle sales. Meanwhile, China retaliated by imposing 100% tariffs on Canadian canola oil and meal. and 25% tariffs on pork and seafood. Canadian farmers were getting destroyed. The canola industry alone represents billions in annual exports. Carney faced a choice: continue following American policy that was killing both Canadian EV adoption and Canadian agriculture, or make a deal that fixes both problems simultaneously. He chose the deal. The structure is actually brilliant. The quota system is controlled, starting at 49,000 vehicles and rising gradually to 70,000 over 5 years. The affordability requirement ensures these vehicles actually help consumers. The deal includes commitments from China to make considerable investment into Canada's auto sector within 3 years, signaling potential joint ventures and manufacturing partnerships. Canada maintains all existing safety and cybersecurity standards, and the agricultural benefits are immediate, with Chinese tariffs on canola dropping from 85% to 15% by March 1st, 2026. Donald Trump's reaction was predictably explosive. He posted on Truth Social that if Carney thinks he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. Trump threatened that if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. He called it one of the worst deals of any kind in history. But here's what makes Trump's threats particularly dangerous. If he actually imposes 100% tariffs on all Canadian goods, the impact would be devastating for both countries. Canada is the top export destination for 36 U.S. states. Nearly $3.6 billion CAD worth of goods and services cross the border each day. About 60% of U.S. crude oil imports are from Canada, as are 85% of U.S. electricity imports. And here's the part that terrifies Detroit. Some of America's best-selling vehicles are manufactured in Canada. The Toyota RAV4, Honda Civic, and Chevrolet Silverado all have significant Canadian production. If Trump actually follows through with 100% tariffs, these vehicles would double in price overnight. American consumers would be paying the price for blocking Chinese EVs from Canada. Carney didn't back down. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, he delivered a speech widely seen as a direct rebuke of Trump. He said, "We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition," and urged the world's middle powers to deepen cooperation in the face of coercion and threats. He stated that middle powers must act together because if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. Trump responded by saying that Canada lives because of the United States. Carney shot back that Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Then Carney made the statement that sent shockwaves through Washington. China has become more predictable than the US in recent months. The Prime Minister of Canada just publicly stated that dealing with communist China is easier and more reliable than dealing with the United States. That's a fundamental realignment of Canadian foreign policy. The response from the American automotive industry has been pure panic masked as concern for workers. The American Automotive Policy Council and Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association issued a joint statement expressing concern that the tariff reduction has the potential to undermine Canada's auto sector and presents risks to the future of the integrated North American auto supply chain. Note who the members of these organizations are: Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, the big three American automakers. The same companies that have spent decades failing to produce affordable EVs that consumers actually want. They can't compete on price. They can't compete on features. They can't compete on technology. So they're begging the government to keep the competition out through tariff walls. Here's what should terrify American automakers. Canadians actually want these vehicles. A Ledger poll conducted between January 30th and February 2nd found that 61% of Canadians were in favor of Chinese EVs in the Canadian market. Automotive News reports that new car dealers in Canada are prepared to add Chinese EV brands to their showrooms, and buyers are ready to try them because of affordability and falling brand loyalty. Multiple Canadians interviewed at the Canadian International Auto Show said they would absolutely consider buying a Chinese-made EV. This is the critical shift that American automakers refuse to acknowledge. Consumers don't care where their cars are made. They care about value, features, quality, and price. Chinese manufacturers deliver on all four. American manufacturers deliver on none. Here's what makes this situation absolutely impossible for the United States to control. Canada isn't just allowing imports. Carney stated that over the next 3 years, the Canadian government expects this agreement will drive considerable new Chinese joint venture investment in Canada with trusted partners to protect and create new auto manufacturing careers for Canadian workers. If Chinese automakers build manufacturing facilities in Canada, those vehicles become Canadian-made under USMCA rules. They would qualify for tariff-free entry into the United States. Trump can't block them without violating the trade agreement he himself negotiated. This is exactly what happened with Japanese and Korean automakers in the 1980s and 1990s. They faced protectionist pressure, so they built factories in North America. Once the factories were operational, they became integrated into the supply chain and effectively unstoppable. Chinese manufacturers are following the same playbook. Use Canada as the entry point. Build joint ventures and manufacturing partnerships. Establish dealer networks and service infrastructure. Then expand production and eventually gain USMCA qualifying status for US market entry. The immediate impact of 49,000 Chinese EVs entering Canada might seem small at about 3% of Canada's total vehicle market, but the long-term impact is catastrophic for American automakers. First, it establishes Chinese brands in the North American market. Once BYD, Geely, and other manufacturers have dealer networks, service infrastructure, and brand recognition in Canada, expanding to the US becomes dramatically easier. Second, it creates pricing pressure across the entire market. When Canadians can buy a BYD Seal for $25,000 to $35,000 CAD with features that Tesla charges extra for, every other manufacturer has to justify their pricing. The entire market reprices when $15,000 to $25,000 EVs become available. Third, it demonstrates that Chinese manufacturing quality meets Western safety and regulatory standards. Once these vehicles pass Canadian certification, the argument that they're inferior products collapses. Fourth, it creates political pressure in the United States. American consumers living near the Canadian border will be able to see Chinese EVs everywhere. They'll know Canadians are paying half the price for vehicles with better features. The political pressure to allow Chinese vehicles into the US market will become overwhelming. The United States faces an impossible situation. If Trump actually imposes 100% tariffs on all Canadian goods, he destroys the integrated North American economy that American manufacturers depend on. Vehicle production, energy imports, and supply chains all collapse. If he doesn't follow through on his threats, he looks weak, and Canada continues with the deal anyway. Chinese manufacturers establish themselves in North America and eventually push into the US market. The United States built its trade policy on the assumption that allies would follow American leadership. Canada just demonstrated that assumption is dead. When American policy demands don't align with Canadian interests, Canada will pursue its own path. And here's the final kicker. Trump himself said he wanted Chinese automakers to come to the US to build vehicles. He criticized Biden's 100% tariffs. Canada is giving Chinese manufacturers exactly that opportunity. Build joint ventures, establish manufacturing, create jobs, prove the market exists, then expand into the United States using the same framework Trump said he supported. America built a wall, Canada opened a door, and Chinese EVs are flooding through it right now. The automotive industry will never be the same. Stay tuned.